Hey everyone, chaosdrive here, and I'm back with another devlog and some explanations, but we'll get to that soon enough. So about a month ago, I released the first devlog on an RPG game I started working on, and some questions were raised. So what happened to neonrain? For those of you that haven't been watching my channel for very long, neonrain is the cyberpunk themed platformer / metroidvania game I was working on. I actually got a lot done and made about 5 devlogs about the process, so if you're interested and want context, you can go watch those on my channel. That game is actually what I created this YouTube channel for. I wanted to show my progress in developing this metroidvania. I even had a full story and world planned out for it. So what happened and why did I stop? Well, the short answer is because the game wasn't fun. Something I've learned about game development is that in a lot of ways, a great game is discovered by the developer rather than just being created. By this, I mean that along the game dev journey, some mechanics and features will prove to be fun and some will not. In this way, you kind of have to let the game lead you to where it wants to go. With neonrain, I went into the project with pretty much the whole game planned out how I wanted it to be, and it ended up not being that fun to play. So over the past couple weeks, I've been working on totally recreating neonrain, but keeping it simple and fun instead of trying to add a massive box of features to avoid scope creep. So in other words, neonrain isn't over, it's just finally getting started. The biggest change I made is that instead of a metroidvania, this new unnamed game is going to be a precision platformer with small combat mechanics sprinkled in. One of the first things I did was make the player art and animations. These are all placeholder now, and I'm planning on fully redesigning the player character in future devlogs. After the animations were completed, I wasted no time. I got straight into GameMaker and started coding. I created a very basic platformer movement system, which included being able to jump and move side to side. Then I realized that this player controller didn't have the game feel that I wanted. So after a bunch of research and YouTube videos, I decided to add forces into the player controller to make the movement feel more reactive. By forces, I mean things like acceleration, friction, and variable gravity. Now, when moving, instead of just starting at a constant speed, the player accelerates to their top speed. This acceleration is affected by a friction variable depending on what surface the player is standing on. I also made it so when jumping, the player has a lower gravity on the way up and a higher gravity on the way down. This really improves the overall feel of the jump. After all these little features were done, I thought I should finally start adding more advanced movements, such as wall sliding and wall jumping. For this, I implemented a finite state machine into my player character. I do a check to see if the player is touching a wall, and if they are, then they'll glide down the wall at a slow speed. Pretty simple. Wall jumping is a little bit more complicated. At first, I just made it so if the player's on the wall, then they are allowed to jump. But this makes it so the player can essentially climb any vertical surface by just spamming the jump button, which I don't want. So on top of the jump, I also assign them a horizontal acceleration in the opposite direction of the wall, and I don't allow any player input for a couple milliseconds after wall jumping. Now you can't use wall jumping to climb up a singular wall, but you can use it when there are 2 walls. Perfect. The next thing I did was add a sliding and crouching mechanic. This can be used to access spaces that are too small to access when standing. The logic is very simple. If the player presses the down key while moving fast, they will perform a slide. Otherwise, they'll crouch. I really want this game to have speedrunning capabilities, so polishing all these movement mechanics is very important. One thing I did to polish the movement a bit was implementing a jump buffer. Normally, if the player presses the jump button right before hitting the ground, it'll be like they never pressed it at all. But a jump buffer counts a couple milliseconds after the jump button is pressed, and if the player hits the ground within that time, they'll automatically jump. This really improves the game feel. I also implemented a slide buffer that is identical to the jump buffer, but for sliding. Another small thing I implemented was coyote time. This is a feature in most commercial platformers where the player has a tiny window after leaving a surface that they can still jump. I think this is important because there are many times when a player will try to jump after leaving the ledge and blame the game for not registering their input. The last main thing I created was a basic gun system. I wanted to make sure the game doesn't become totally combat driven and stays true to the precision platformer genre, so I created guns that affect the player's speed with knockback. These guns will be used for combat purposes and bosses of course, but the main use for them will be in the platforming aspect of the game. So yeah, that's everything I've worked on up to this point. I messed around a little bit with level design and created a tutorial level for testing purposes. and it's been a lot of fun to try and speedrun to beat my previous times. I definitely plan on making more art and story elements in the near future, so thank you to everyone who has enjoyed watching the Neon Rain devlogs, and I'll see you in the next one.